What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at the latest update for Witchfire. It's 0.9 update to be specific, known as Revelations. Witchfire is a game that I've been covering throughout its early access journey for quite some time. I've made a few videos about it here and there discussing some of its updates, but those are relatively few and far between, so you'd be forgiven for not knowing that. But just a couple of days ago, they dropped this latest one, and I wanted to go over it. But I do need to inform you first that I did actually have a little bit of early access to this update, but due to just some timing and Father's Day around the corner, this is going out a little later than I would have liked. Now, as part of that early access, the developer, the astronauts, did provide me some save files and stuff so I could check out some of these updates in full. So what you're ultimately seeing here is actually a mix of my own character as well as a little bit of that in-game save they provided. But unfortunately, I do think they made a small mistake there because the save file they provided did not give me access to the new area, the marshlands, so I can't really show you too much of that. But as always, with this being a sort of Souls-like extraction style game, the new area is basically just a new level to explore with its own events and vibe and stuff, and believe it or not, looks a lot like a marshlands. But while the new zone is exciting in and of itself, it's actually probably, at least to me anyway, the least interesting part of this update, because we also got the addition of some story content, which is something the game has lacked up to this point, and so we're seeing a bit more of that come to fruition. We've got some balance changes, a pretty big nerf to one weapon in particular, new spells, rosary beads, enemies to go with the new area, of course, reworks to existing mechanics, additional stuff, just plenty of stuff to talk about here. So let's kind of go over that piece by piece, starting with the story side of things. So Witchfire is at its core a game about fighting back against witches who have taken over wide swaths of territory via the Prayers. Prayers being effectively witch hunters, utilizing their own magic via witchfire against them to fuel their own powers as they in fact hunt down these witches, though some of them are hardly saints themselves, outside of the one that is literally a saint, but that's neither here nor there. The big thing here story-wise is that they've introduced the dialogue system, which is a pretty basic dialogue system, but was not there previously, and you can actually talk to some of the NPCs you'll be meeting, including the fallen prayers, which have their own narrative introduction as well now. So, long story short, there is, in fact, more story here, but that's hardly all. They've also made a small change to class selection, which I did jump in to check out. Previously, you would do this at the beginning, but they've actually put class selection a little farther into the game, so you kind of get a chance to mess around a little bit before you ultimately get that, though it's not exactly a long time. You just have to get through like the first little area before you get to your main base of operations. Presumably just to give you an idea of how some of the mechanics actually work before you dive fully into it. Now, they also made some changes to world corruption. World corruption is a mechanic that could happen within, let's say, missions out there into the extraction level. So when you're running around a given area, world corruption in the later stages is something that can happen. And I would describe this as basically just a balance update alongside adding some new things. Like, for instance, once you get past a certain point in the game, you can force open chests now. They added an event that is a little difficult, but can be used to clear world corruption, alongside just adjusting the rates and everything for it. So it doesn't look like anything wildly drastic, just more of a balance change there than anything else. Then there are those changes to gear that I mentioned. Again, this is mostly just standard balance stuff. However, there is one of these that caught a little more of that than the others, and that is a shotgun known as Echo. Echo is a relatively early gun you can get your hands on, and it was very good for what it was. They reined a lot of that in. It has much lower base stun. Its base damage has been lowered by about 15%. They've also adjusted some of the upgrades you get for that weapon, and it looks like it mostly went from being great to okay. However, that's hardly the only weapon or bit of equipment that got changes. There are several others to a variety of different weapons, but those for the most part were buffs rather than nerfs, so there's that at least. Now, to go along with all of that new story content we talked about just a moment ago, they also introduced a variety of UI additions, obviously the dialogue screen itself, but they also changed how letters and story are presented to you in between missions, or expeditions. They've added the last bit of research to your workshop as well, allowing you to potentially send certain items off to the Vatican for a proper analysis. They've added the dossier screen, which is basically just your journal, so you can keep track of the quests and things you're actively working on with all this new narrative stuff. So that's kind of all in one decent place now. But there's also been some smaller changes, like you can jump to the first area, the outskirts, which is connected to your hub area, but from the level select screen as opposed to having like manually run over there. But speaking of running around your hub area, they've also added a garden. So there is an NPC quest you can get as part of the main base introduction now, and as part of that quest you unlock the garden. This is pretty much what it sounds like. It's an area that you can go and start planting up resources. When you are out on missions now, you can potentially find resources and upgrades for your garden that will then, over time, produce those resources for you. Like, you can grab a jar of bees, various types of plants from, of course, picking up the plants on the missions, or you can even just sit on a bench there and hang out if you like, but obviously these resources will be used elsewhere. They've also added new vaults and torments. So the vaults, if you're unaware, like dungeons, you can access by increasing the Gnosis level, which is more or less the gated progression to much of the meta progression throughout the experience. Increasing it gives you access to various things like these vaults in certain missions. You'll be able to dispel the illusion, I guess you could call it, that prevents you from accessing them otherwise, and they've added a new one to the outskirts. And they also added some torments as well. The torments are basically modifiers you can add in the late game to make an individual mission more challenging than it would be otherwise, in addition to the regular ramp up. So when you start pulling all of that together, I think you can see that this is a pretty sizable update to Witchfire, and in particular, combined with it being the 0.9 update, it is starting to feel like this is moving closer to release, especially with the narrative side of things. And honestly, just playing through it, it's starting to feel like a more complete game overall. And while there are still certainly a couple of things that I think need to be worked on in the meantime, after coming up on, I believe, 2 years in early access and a few months, maybe longer than that. I know they were on Epic for a while exclusively, I think, but time well spent, because long story short, the game is getting much better and it is really fun to play. And while this sort of interesting amalgamation of other types of genres and game mechanics was always pretty fun to play, in a way that is certainly surprising if you jump into it for the first time, and by the way, it's 20% off right now until the 25th, so a few more days. I'm excited to jump into the full release of this because of how well all of this has come together. I think this is a game that has just gotten significantly better as time has gone by, and I'm really looking forward to 1.0 so I can jump in fully and review this thing, as well as see everything they've got planned story-wise. But for today, I do think that is more or less going to do it. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you've been playing this or have any other thoughts, by all means, throw them down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.